in 2021, coupled with the ongoing national identification number and SIM integration exercise. Well, let's get talking. And now we'll look at other stories later in our show. Now, most governments, multilateral organizations, and the private sector across the world usually resort to borrowing to bridge revenue shortfalls and infrastructure financing. It is understandable that the federal government borrows to finance budget deficits, specific projects, and refinancing maturing debt obligations. However, Nigeria's growing debt profile has been an object of discourse and concerns for stakeholders in recent times. Total debt stock, which stood at 7.50 trillion in 2012, had grown to about 42.8 trillion as of June 30, 2022. Indeed, the country's public debt has been under scrutiny for the rate of growth, debt service to revenue ratio, and how it is utilized. Well, let's get talking and start this week very quickly. I'm being joined by a fellow of a chartered accountant, practicing chartered accountant and management consultant, who is also the lead consultant and chief executive officer of 2612 Consulting and Professional Services, Mr. Peter Adebayo. Mr. Adebayo, thank you so much. It's the first time on the show. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Tolu, for having me. And I must commend you guys for doing a fantastic job.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's get talking about this ballooning debt that we face as a country, and everyone is bothered about it. What do you make of this figure? A 20% hike already, and we are standing at about 46.25 trillion naira. That's taking out ways and means. We've been talking about this for some day, but put your professional perspective into this. What does it mean for us as a country?
Mm-hmm. It's actually very frightening. It's worrisome. And as a matter of fact, there is a cause for alarm. This discussion will be more interesting if we ask a question, and that question is, how did we get here in the first instance as a nation? I will be telling you, frankly speaking, that we didn't get here by accident. We got here deliberately by choice. And like I said, to make it more interesting, I want to flash back, taking a review of this debt profile under three different dispensations. And I'm going to begin with the dispensation of President Olusegun Obasanjo. Under President Obasanjo, he was in government between 1999 and 2007. As at the time he got in there was a debt profile of about 3.55 trillion. He was there for 8 years, and at the end of 8 years, he left a debt burden of about 2.42 trillion.
Yeah.
If you look at what happened at that point in time and now, by the end of this program, you will know that comparatively talking, that has been the best time ever for Nigeria in terms of managing our debt stock. Now, Obasanjo handed over to Yar'Adua. On passage of Yar'Adua didn't allow him to fulfill whatever aspirations that he had for Nigeria. And accidentally, Jonathan took over. Jonathan took over in 2007. 2009. Yar'Adua took over in 2007. About 2 years after, he passed on. As at the time Jonathan took over, our debt profile then was around 2015. Our debt profile was about 12.6 trillion, actually. And that was coming from 2010, 2011, 12, 13, when we had 10 trillion, 11 trillion, before we got to 12.6 trillion. Now, it took over that debt 6 trillion. And that was a 38% increase in debt of 12 months. Between 2017 and 2018, that debt profile moved from 21.73 trillion to 23.39 trillion. I mean, please try and follow up. That's why I said, if you don't go back to where we started, we won't appreciate where we are and where we're going. Now, between 2018 and 2019, Our debt profile rose from 23.39 trillion to 27.4 trillion. And that was about $84 billion. The increase in absolute terms during that year was 4.01 trillion. And that was 17.14 trillion increase in debt stock as a nation. Now, from 2019 down to 2020, that was a year when it was like what we never expected, happened in our debt management history. Moving from 27.4 trillion in 2019, by 2020, our debt profile had risen to 32.92 trillion. That was about $86.39 billion. And that was $5.52 trillion increase in our debt profile, 20% in a year. Now, from 2020, that was the COVID year. 2021, we moved from 32.92 trillion to 39.56 trillion. That was another devastating experience. And that was 6.64 trillion increase in a year, over and above what we had in year 2020. Now, last year, 2022, as at 31st December, our debt profile, we stood at 39.56 in 2021, had risen to 46.25 trillion. And that was precisely 103.11 billion US dollars as at the end of 2022. That was another increase of 17%. Now, there have been projections that come May 2023 that it is not unlikely that our debt profile will hit 77 trillion naira. What does that tell us? If this were to come into fruition by the end of May, what we are playing with, we are sitting on the keg of gunpowder. That's why I said it's worrisome. What we are playing with is actually an increase of 30.75 trillion naira between 31st of December 2022 and end of May 2023. And that is an increase of 66.48% over what we had as of December. This is why I have said it is not just worrisome, it is extremely frightening. And the situation we are now as far as debt is like sitting on a keg of gunpowder. If care is not taken, it is waiting to explode.
How do we now get to service this debt? Because servicing it is something that is very important. How do we get that capacity to continue to service it if it is taking so much of our revenue and we know that we have a revenue challenge as a country?
Well, thank you very much. Servicing of debt is a function of how much you have secured by way of loan. An integral part of our national life as a nation is our budgetary system.
Yeah.
All these things we are talking about, they are products of budget. Except I don't have the information to the very best of my knowledge. And on the basis of statistics that I've had to go through, over the last 10 years, Nigeria has consistently, perennially, run a deficit financial system.
Yeah.
And the question is, if your revenue is 1 million naira, why budget expenditure for 10 million naira? And that's why we keep having deficit upon deficit. If you look at what happened in the case of Obasanjo left over, Yar'Adua took over, Jonathan took over, and of course Buhari took over. If you look at 2015 to date, when this administration came on board, you will agree with me that the debt profile that was about 12.6 trillion at the point of taking over has reached to 46.25 trillion. So it's all about our planning. Something fundamental is wrong with our planning system. And when you look at our budgetary system, there are a lot of anomalies that have characterized our budgetary system. The issue is, look, we cannot sustain the expenditure profile any longer. It is a reality we must be prepared to face. I mean, there is a saying that, look, if you suddenly discover over the years will not take you to your destination of purpose, it does not matter how many years you have been there. It becomes irrelevant. What you need to do at that point in time is to make a U-turn. And this man says something about Einstein. He says, doing things over and over, same again and again, and expecting a different result is the best definition of madness. So it has come to a level where Nigeria must be very pragmatic in our budgetary planning. All we need to do is, okay, look at 2023. Our budget in 2023 is a budget of 20 trillion naira.
Yes.
Now, if we have to, for instance, peg ourselves. Now, you look at the quantum of it that we're expecting as revenue. In the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, there's never been a particular year that 180% of what we targeted as revenue earnings expectation was even realized. So if we are not realizing, you have targeted that you're going to generate about 8 or 9 billion, and you're not getting it. So the question is, why continue in this trajectory? I mean, in this kind of stuff.
Projection that you never get to meet.
You never get to it. So it's just like we are not being sincere to ourselves. And I know you can't take away the fact that, well, quote unquote, interest of so many people are there. And until we're able to demonstrate this sincerity and commitment, I doubt if we'll be able to solve this problem.
Many talk about cutting cost of governance, reducing all of these blocking leakages, and all of that is also a way to go to help manage revenue. What is your opinion with regards to that, particularly as we expect a new government? And many say a lot needs to change.
Definitely a lot needs to change. I mean, if there's anything that has characterized Nigerian governance over the past 2 decades, it's absolutely nothing but inefficiency in our fiscal federalism. What do I mean by inefficiency? Inefficiency paves way for a lot of leakages. There are a lot of leakages in our system. Leakages, a lot of frivolities, a lot of, not being sincere in ourselves. By virtue of running a zero-based budgeting system, which means you are expected to rationalize every budget that you are presenting on a yearly basis, right? But at the same time, it has not really made any serious impact, in the way these budgets are run on a yearly basis. So it's for me, I think we have not been very sincere enough, and I think it's never too late. Thank God now that the battle is changing. I know there is an Herculean task before the president-elect, but I have no doubt, taking a look at his pedigree, of course, he has been tested, and there is no doubting about that. Whatever anybody wants to say, I'm not here to either criticize or whatever. The reality is that he has been tested, and we have seen what he has done over the years, and I think he has what it takes. It's an Herculean task. I believe that, one of the things we have also experienced over the years is we have not we have not been able to put round peg in round holes. Yeah. And one thing I anticipate, which I also expect with the incoming administration, is that putting round peg in round hole will be able to at least achieve some of these inefficiencies, because inefficiency must be eliminated in
totality. Let's talk about borrowing again. Now, many will say, or many analysts like you will argue that, Tolu, it's not really borrowing. Borrowing really might not be a problem. It is what we use the funds. For example, look at the rail lines. Yes. Look at what is happening with our railway infrastructure in Buhari's administration. Right. It's never like this. That's right. It's never been like this. Sure. And you would also say, experts like you would also say that government cannot do all of these fundings alone. Yeah. So where do we get the monies? Where do we channel the borrowings to?
Now, let me make you an intricate distinction. Borrowing is an integral part of life. Whether you are an individual, whether you are a corporate entity, whether you are a government, whether you are a religious body, borrowing is inevitable in life. America has the largest economy all over the world. Yeah. You take a look at other countries like Japan, like China. Those are the largest economic, countries all over the world. But they borrow. The largest indebted nation in the world is the United States of America. Yes. Now, the issue is, I don't have any problem with borrowing. And I can tell you, without blinking an eye, that borrowing, there's no problem with borrowing. What is wrong with borrowing is when you borrow insensibly. Nigeria, we are supposed to borrow sensibly. One thing is for you to borrow sensibly. Another thing is for you to apply the process of that borrowing sensibly. Yeah. Sometimes we borrow sensibly, but the application of the process of the borrowing, we do not apply sensibility in it. Right. Now, when you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, part of why the act was enacted, including CBN Act, is to bring about fiscal prudence in our public finance management system. And you will agree with me that a lot of infractions have been recorded. So I don't think there's any problem borrowing. I mean, people, before people will now say, after all, Dangote is owing. Dangote will continue to owe. Dangote did what Nigeria could not do over the last 2 decades. He said, okay, fine. 5 years, I want to set up a refinery. We're going to get there. He did set up the refinery. Of course, it's still owing, but I can tell you that is a business debt.
Yeah.
Now, when you are owing, there is a reason why you are borrowing. Why are you borrowing? You are borrowing to finance infrastructure. How do you guarantee? In public sector, there's what we call committed fund. In public sector, the moment a fund is committed on no account, under no circumstance, must a naira be taken out of that committed fund to other things. So we come to terms with discipline, and of course that takes me to accountability. There is no accountability. Otherwise, if you borrow, look at the $800 million that we're planning to borrow. That's another different dimension entirely. If you are borrowing $800 million,
processing that fee alone, I've seen the amount that is taken.
It's killing. You want to borrow $800 million. Do you know the implication of that? By the time you translate that to naira, that's about maybe another 5 or whatever trillion. Now, and they are saying, I don't know, I mean, very wrong. I understand that they are going to use it as palliative. Is that right?
Yes.
Palliative. How is that going to come? You are going to have to distribute naira cash to Nigerians,
cash.
about 50 million Nigerians.
Yes.
The question to ask is, how did you come about 50 million in the first instance? In an environment where we don't even have a database. Now, if you are going to distribute 50 million, how much are you going to give to an individual Nigerian? Somebody you are going to give 100,000 to, 200,000 to. Already he has a problem of 500,000. By the time the 100,000, 200,000 is coming to him, he's using it to finance his consumption. So the impact that you think you are going to make by doing palliatives is back to square one at the end of the day. So be channeled to distribution or whatever. I would ordinarily advise that we channel it to infrastructural development, refineries that have become very moribund over the past few years. So these are some of the issues that we have to contend with.
Let's now, when we have issues, we discuss the issues. I always like us to profile solutions so that at least we know what we can do to move on. Because many will say there's need to pursue the fiscal consolidation so very seriously, increase revenue generation. Of course, revenue coming into government is very low at the moment. So what would you advise? What do you think?
We must be pragmatic at this time. We must be pragmatic. Of course, all hope is not lost. Thank God that the president-elect has come to give us an agenda, renewed hope. True. And I am privileged to be one of those Nigerians who still believe that there is hope for Nigeria.
Hope. Yes.
It does not matter the Japa syndrome.
Yeah.
You understand? Now, what do we need to do? Remedies are there. We need to start doing things differently. No matter how long we have been here, I believe that we can come to terms with the fact that we are on the wrong path. Now, there is urgent need for us to undertake a reform, and a complete overhaul of our budgetary control system. Our budgetary control architecture needs to be recalibrated as a nation. Now, number two, there is need for us to diversify our economy. Of course, government is doing that already. From oil predominantly to oil and non-oil sources. And when we are talking about non-oil, the only aspect that government appears to be looking at over the period, the recent times, has been that of tax. And I can tell you, it's a good aspiration. But I tell you, in an environment where economy is not thriving, where industries are, where businesses are dying every day, you can't achieve the revenue target through tax alone. There are solid areas. There are quite a number of other areas we can look into. So diversifying from oil to oil and non-oil, with particular emphasis on things like solid minerals and other natural resources, is another way out. Of course, another major problem is prioritizing issues of development. One of the things I've noticed about Nigerian governance, over the years, is we try to politicize development. Things that have to do with political development of the nation.
Yeah.
We inject politics into it, all right? And until we depoliticize issues of development, I can tell you, we may not be able to make a headway. When you are supposed to take a decision, you must, I know it's not as if we don't have an idea what to do, but what is lacking in Nigeria over the years is that political will. And I want the present government to bring that political will into bear by objectively addressing this area. Of course, there is need for us to improve the state of our infrastructure. Rails. Go and look at it anywhere in the world. If you have a nation that does not have a functional rail system, there's no way the economy can grow. And that's the reality. So I want, of course, I know government, the outgoing government has done a bit in the area of rail, even though it has not made so much of impact. All right? But I want more attention, to be diverted to the area of infrastructure. And of course, moving forward, I will also want an entrenchment of accountability in government.
Very important.
Entrenchment of accountability in governance. There must be stewardship in fiscal federalism. You see, I just mentioned the Fiscal Responsibility Act. I mentioned the CBN Act. Among other acts, the problem with Nigeria is not that we don't have enough of acts. As a matter of fact, for me, if for the next 5 years, the legislature does not promulgate or enact any law, that all we can do is to implement the existing laws. I can tell you Nigeria will make progress by 500%. About law. Go and look at what is running with us. There are quite infractions of the provisions of Responsibility Act, of CBN Act, and quite a number of other things. So I will also want, which was something I feel we missed in the government of Yaradua. It was coming with all determination, dedication, and commitment that was going to uphold the rule of law. Unfortunately, its passage never allowed this to come into being. So these are some of the things that I feel we should do, if we want to move forward as a nation.
I must thank you so much, and we'll definitely keep a tab on you. We'll definitely have you join us on our program. This is your first time on the show, and I must say it's been educating and very insightful. I've been speaking to Mr. Peter Adebayo. He's a chartered accountant, practicing chartered accountant, management consultant, and also the lead consultant, chief executive at 2612 Consulting and Professional Services. He's been giving us insights into debt out. Thank you so much. We hope to have you join the program very soon.
Thank you,
very
Tolu.
shortly.
It's been